All right, hello everyone. It is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. My name is Drew Sukup, and on behalf of VMUG, I'd like to welcome you to today's 10ZiG webcast, Teams Optimization and Webex Vdi Support for VMware Deployments, presented by Kevin Greenway, CTO of 10ZiG. Thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your continued support in the global VMUG program. Before we begin, I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webcast will be recorded and available for you on demand. You'll receive an email with the on-demand link, so keep an eye out for that. That should be coming into your email inboxes at about 1 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. Second, we're going to have a short Q&A session that will follow today's presentation if we still have time. All questions will need to be entered into the question and answer section on the left side, as you can see. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, though, because we love to answer questions throughout. Try to stump Kevin. Come on, CTO of 10ZiG. He's got everything down. No, we will be looking through the questions and answering some that are applicable to the content as we go on, and of course, the Q&A section at the end. Third, there will be a short online evaluation that pops up as you exit the webcast. Please take a minute and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. All attendees from today's webcast who opted in their information at registration will be entered into a raffle to win a $150 Amazon gift card. The winner will be contacted directly by 10ZiG, so good luck. All right, with all of that said, let's get started. From all the way in the United Kingdom, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much, Drew. That was a great intro, and thanks for talking through the housekeeping for attendees. And hi, everybody. Really pleased that you could join me today. I hope you're excited to see this session. So let's kick off. Just a little bit about me first. I've been with 10ZiG for 9 years now and experienced in VMware amongst other EUC and VDI products. Previous to 10ZiG, I actually worked for a unified company's telecommunications company, so very well versed in this overall technology. And at 10ZiG specifically, I head up the R&D and support teams globally at 10ZiG, including both here in the UK and in 10ZiG US, and work closely with all departments and teams, as well as externally with VMware and other partners within our ecosystem. As Drew said, I'm here today to present the latest from 10ZiG and VMware around unified communications offerings, including Microsoft Teams optimization improvements and Cisco Webex Vdi support. This includes a demonstration of some of the features that I'll cover throughout. And again, without further ado, let's kick off. So to start with, we're just going to display a poll here. Now, I'd love it if people could just participate in the polls, because again, it allows us to gauge our audience and kind of tune the presentation around this. So hopefully everybody is seeing the poll on the screen now. If again you could just participate in that. And there we go. So we're getting some stats here, which is great.
Yeah, that's right. Audience, we don't want this to be a sit down and listen. We want this to be a very interactive presentation. We've got a couple more, we have a couple more poll questions coming up as the presentation goes on. And of course, I just want to give a shout out to everyone in the question and answer section who's been sending in their questions or their alohas or hellos. Shout out to Bo, Paul, Sean. Thank you, everyone. Anyway, yes, awesome. We're getting a lot of great results coming in. So just wanted to vamp a little bit.
That's great. Thanks everybody for participating in that first. I won't display this current one, but it's sitting pretty evenly. We've got 33% using 10ZiG already, 44 no, and 22 planning for future. So again, a good round number here. So let's again continue on. So again, specifically for those that aren't working with 10ZiG already, let's cover a quick background. We're solely focused as a thin and zero client vendor, and we're specialized in VMware, again, amongst other VDI and EUC products. We're headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and our EMEA office, which is, again, where I'm based, is in the UK. We're a founding VMware Ready partner, and that basically means that we certify all the 10ZiG endpoints on the VMware Ready marketplace. Now, where we're really able to differ from our competitors, and this is a question that we get asked every time of first engagement with a prospect or a new contact, is that we're solely focused, and our staff through sales and technical are skilled in VMware through training and certification, and this takes our sales and support to the next level. In addition, we're a front runner in many VMware innovations, such as our Linux-based Blast Extreme marketed Zero clients, and our company motto is that we make our product fit your environment and not the other way around. And this is really more critical than ever in such fast-paced and changing times that we're in at the moment, as a result of the pandemic and the remote working scenario that, again, many businesses, if not all, are under and looking at for the future still. And just to summarize our VMware Ready endpoints, so we have a range of x86 based endpoints, and these are based on Linux and Windows, as the demo will show. All our endpoints include a wide array of hardware options, such as varying display connectivity, USB-C, fiber, and PoE. And all the 10ZiG x86 endpoints include enterprise-free centralized management via the 10ZiG Manager, and additionally bundled in for free is cloud enablement for remote management. So you can manage these devices over the internet and manage your remote users as if they're in office. We're also a Hvd partner, and this is where many customers have, specifically on the VMware platform, have come to know 10ZiG over the past few years, where we are a partner of Hvd and stock Terra 2 based Zero clients. And finally, just to mention that we offer a flexible demo program for anybody wanting to trial our products in your VMware environment. So reach out to our sales team in Phoenix, very friendly team, and again, we can hook you up with any demos. So just to set the scene of what we are seeing on the 10ZiG side in terms of demand for unified communications, or UC. Now, we know the early pandemic saw an overnight switch of employees meeting face-to-face to being solely reliant on UC and collaboration tools. The future is still somewhat a little sketchy, and whether it will be kind of a permanent work from home or return to office, or perhaps a hybrid of both, or the flexible option. But either way, it does look like the business strategy is very much about continued UC support, again, as I'll explain. So firstly, we're specifically not calling out the UC platform here, but these stats on the right-hand side of the slide, again, from a leading UC platform, have shown the revenue growth as well as revenue projections from Q4 2019 through Q4 2021. And to bring up some further interesting stats here, Gartner firstly make the assumption that by 2022, 74% of organizations will move at least 5% of their workforce from temporary work from home to permanent remote working. However, 82% of company leaders plan to allow their employees to work remotely some of the time as we head out of the pandemic. And this adds to the discussions all around the media that suggest flexible working is the future. And that's great because it gives employees the option of working from home and office. And I'm sure you'll all agree that there are pros and cons to each scenario. And finally, Million Insights then predicts that the UC market will reach $167 billion by 2025. And this really again sets the path for the future. And as we'll see now, how 10ZiG are embracing this future. Now, this again takes us to the next poll, where we just want to assess what is your preferred future employee strategy. Is it remote work from home? Is it office? Is it flexible hybrid? Or are you undecided? So again, if you could answer that poll, it would be much appreciated, and it'd be interesting to see the stats.
And really quickly, Kevin, we did have a question coming in from Greg. He
Sure.
asked, do any of the Zero clients have DVI connections?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do still have some clients that support DVI connections. However, that's dependent on the territory. But certainly where there is shortage of DVI connections on any specific models for the particular territory, we do supply DP-based Zero clients and supply basically the adapters that switch to DVI. So what I would suggest, Greg, is to reach out to the sales team, or I can make that introduction for you, and dependent on your requirements, we can qualify whether you're suited to a native client that offers DVI natively, or again, we can switch you into a DP-based unit for future-proofing with an adapter that can convert over to DVI. We'll just refresh that result here, and that is, I'll push this result to the audience. That is very much as I predicted, that it is the flexible option. So it's very much, again, what the media is saying, what we're hearing from customers that we talk to. So that's fantastic, and thanks for everybody's participation there. So the purpose of this slide, as we get onto the content, is to briefly discuss a potential problem of using unified communication or collaboration platforms in a virtual environment such as VMware. And the problem is exacerbated in a remote work environment, as I'll cover. So the user's endpoints, as you can see on the left-hand side, demarked by user 1 and 2. Let's assume that these, obviously pre-March 2020, were located in an office. They're now located at a remote home location. And that means that those endpoints and the home locations have to forward the webcam or the video feed, as well as the audio stream, in both directions to the virtual desktop. The audio video stream is then converted at the virtual desktop, which you can see is demarked by the orange Horizon agents that are associated to each user, and then forwarded to either the other peer directly, dependent on the solution, or via the UC solution, as we can see here represented by the cloud. So the UC solution could either be cloud or on-premise based. So whilst VMware, as you can see in this particular slide, has the long-standing RTAV, or as it's short, real-time audio video compression, to support and improve such solutions, it's less than ideal. So again, I can't show you the mouse cursor here, but hopefully you can see by the arrows the kind of famous it's called either hairpin or trombone effect, where basically the voice and audio traffic is hairpinning around from user 1 through the virtual machine to the UC solution, and then back until eventually it gets to user 2. And ideally what you want, if user 1 and user 2 are communicating, is that audio and video stream goes directly between user 1 and 2 and not around the data center or cloud. That problem itself adds some further problems, not just in terms of reducing things like latency and quality, but it also adds load to the data center because of the fact that the VMs running Horizon are having to do all of the work basically in terms of both encoding the audio and the video for RTAV, as well as encoding the video and the audio stream within the unified communication solutions as well. So you think about the costs if you're running Horizon in cloud or even on-premise, the compute power is increased quite substantially because the virtual machines are doing all of the work, rather than ideally the endpoint that's located at the user's now, again, home locations. So whilst this solution's been great for many years, and it's offered kind of like a seamless under the hood solution for unified comms apps, I think the remote working scenario has really stretched it to its limits, and that's where we kind of move on more to what's become the norm with optimized solutions, and they operate by encoding audio, exactly as I've just mentioned, audio and video locally at the endpoint. And as you can see by the orange indicator here, the SRTP, that voice and media stream is then sent peer-to-peer between the two users' endpoints. And it does that using a media engine, as we'll see in the next slide. And that media engine is either integrated into the VMware Horizon client or as a separate plugin, which sits alongside the Horizon client. And that takes us again to, actually not to poll 3, I'll come back to that in a moment. We'll go to the next slide. So this is, again, a very important slide. It drills down a little bit more in terms of the detail that we talked about in the previous slide. Now, what we're looking at here on the left-hand side is the virtual desktop and the unified communications application that's installed in the virtual desktop. Now, this either, depending on what you're using, so say if it's Microsoft Teams, if it's Zoom, if it's Cisco Webex, that application is installed in the virtual desktop as it would be in a regular desktop computer scenario, but it's installed either with a standalone VDI version or a version of that that has support for VDI by perhaps installing it a specific way, or just by the fact that the application detects the presence that it's being installed into a virtual desktop. And again, you'll see examples of that when we cover the demo. Now, in the case of Microsoft Teams, the Microsoft Teams app communicates directly with the VMware Horizon Agent, which again is installed on the virtual desktop, as you can see. The unified communication application continues to deal with the signaling and authentication, so kind of like the real-time, low overhead processes. So they continue to run natively from let's say, the Teams desktop app. But then importantly, the heavy tasks, such as, again, the video and the audio portion of calls, and even screen sharing in the case of Microsoft Teams, they're offloaded directly to the endpoint on the right-hand side. So on the right-hand side, we can see the endpoint. Let's say it's 10ZiG Thin Client. That 10ZiG Thin Client has the VMware Horizon client as well as the media engine, which provides that capability. Now, it does this via the virtual channels. So these are established between the virtual desktop that runs the Horizon Agent and the endpoint running the VMware Horizon client. And the media and call control virtual channels, again, let's say, for example, for Microsoft Teams, are encapsulated within the remote transport protocol, i.e. Blast Extreme, between, again, the endpoint that's remoting the Horizon session to the endpoint. So where calls take place, either audio or video or even screen sharing, the virtual channels send a message to the endpoint that runs the Horizon client and the media engine to establish those audio and video media paths directly. And so the right-hand side, that media engine, again, that's associated to the endpoint, that's either part of the Horizon client, as it is for Microsoft Teams, or it's a separate plugin, as is the case with platforms like Zoom VDI or Cisco Webex Vdi, again, as we'll cover in the demo. So hopefully that gives a kind of summary of the techniques. It's all about when you're running unified comms apps within VMware Horizon, it's all about running the optimized mode if you can do that, so that you can provide the peer-to-peer connectivity. You can improve the quality to the same level as a regular desktop or laptop, and at the same time reduce the compute overhead in the data center or in cloud where the virtual machines reside. So that takes us to the next poll, which is really to understand the audience today in terms of what platform we're using. Now, again, I'm going to have a pretty good handle of how this is going to come out, but really appreciate everybody's participation here. And just quickly look if we have any more questions at this point.
Right now, it's just a lot of people saying hello. So hello back to Darshak, Friedman, Tracy, everyone that's saying hello. We appreciate it.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Thanks for responding to those, Drew. Appreciate it. All right, so the figures are still coming in, but it again looks kind of predictable with the way I thought it would come out, which is 54% Microsoft Teams, Zoom is 29%, Cisco Webex or Jabber is 14%, and then we've got 3% at other. So that is kind of the way I predicted it would turn out. Okay, so let's move on to Teams optimization, which, as we've seen, is the biggest demand, and that for sure has been the major growth driver that we've seen through the pandemic, and again, the result of remote working. Now, we've converted or switched a number of our customers this past year in order to support this. Now, as is on the slide here, there is a more in-depth link listed here where we actually did a joint webinar with VMUG last year. So do encourage anybody to watch that. That again goes into more detail around the setup, etc. And I've also, sorry, Drew, go on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to let everyone know that that link is live. All of the links that are on this presentation, they're able to click.
Awesome, thank you. And I've also included a 10ZiG handout in the content area, which specifically covers the VMware Teams optimization deployment. Now, that specifically at this point in time is supported on Windows 10 IoT-based clients as well. I'm sure everybody's going to be asking a question around support for Linux. We are tentatively waiting as well. Unfortunately, we are under NDA. All I can say is it's coming soon, and as soon as it's available, we'll be right on the pulse to get that out, and that will be integrated into the 10ZiG Linux clients as well. But that is purely dependent on the Horizon Linux client supporting Teams optimization. Again, we are in regular contact with VMware on that. So let's keep moving on. Now, I think it's important to emphasize some of the significant improvements for Teams optimization that have come along the way since the Teams optimization was first supported by Microsoft in conjunction with VMware. And just to explain this first one for anybody who is not aware, in early versions of using Teams in the optimized mode, where a user participated in a meeting with video participants, one major drawback was that the user operating in the optimized mode, so let's say that user is connecting to Teams through VMware Horizon, they're functioning in the optimized mode. There, as we can see in the slide here, there's 4 participants in the meeting, but in the optimized mode, they would only ever see 1 participant at any one time. And that single participant that they would see would be the most prominent speaker. Now, that works great if you're in a meeting scenario where everybody takes the turn to talk, but I'm sure as you're all aware, the ideal is never really the reality. The situation you often end up with is that there's a dog barking in the background, or a child that steps into the room, or somebody coughs. And what you end up with is a confusing situation where all of a sudden the speaker is switched. Now, what happens again in that scenario is that bottom bar that you saw, the other participants of the meeting ended up being at the bottom of the Teams desktop app, and their video was muted. So the great news is, which I'm here to share today, and this has been around for a few months now, is that the gallery view that you can see on the slide is now supported. So this, let me just bring in the next pointer on the slide. Now, this currently is limited to a 2x2 view, which allows up to 4 participants to be viewed at any one time in the Teams optimized view. And this is anticipated to increase over time by Microsoft and VMware as basically the overall load and quality is assessed. Now, it's also important to note that this feature enhancement comes directly by updating the Microsoft Teams app within the VDI desktop. So you're not required to update the Horizon components, either the Horizon client or the agent. It is just leveraged through a version update of the Teams desktop app. So do make sure, as listed here, that you're running at least 1.4.006073 or higher to leverage the gallery view. Now, there is also even more exciting news on this, that there are some additional preview mode features available within the Teams optimized view. So firstly, large gallery view, which extends further past the 2x2 mode or the regular gallery view. And as you can see in the slide, this, I believe, adds support for up to 49 attendees in the meeting at any one time in conjunction with the optimized mode. And also together mode, if you prefer the style of kind of like the auditorium type or theater type view, that is also supported currently in preview mode. And just like the last slide where we talked about the gallery mode, these preview features are available by, again, leveraging an updated version of the Teams desktop app that runs within the virtual desktop, and that specifically is the build 11161. Now on the 10ZiG side, for this feature, for all the features I've mentioned, we do recommend our mid-range or higher products. So that would be either the 5810Q, which is our outgoing mid-range product that's been with us for probably the past 4 to 5 years, or more recently that's become the 6010Q, which you can see pictured on the slide there. And I'll be demoing those features, by the way, and again, we can hopefully get time to answer some questions on that as well. Now, if we move to even more exciting news, this time relates to the support of Cisco Webex Vdi. So again, this is yet another item of feedback from demand from our existing customers, where we've recently added support for Cisco Webex in conjunction with VMware Horizon. So this offers support for both Cisco Webex, which was formerly known as Cisco Webex Teams, in addition to Cisco Webex Meetings. So this plugin, or the Webex Vdi plugin, is integrated as standard into our Linux-based firmware, so the NOS64 VMware firmware, which is supported from version 16.1.26, which you can download today from our website, and also obviously on Windows-based clients, which you can leverage by installing the plugin directly on the Windows 10 IoT-based client. Now, very similar to the Teams architecture before it, this slide covers a broader view of the Cisco Webex Vdi architecture. So firstly, starting off with the 10ZiG endpoint in black here, which integrates the VMware Horizon client and the Webex and Webex Meeting plugin natively. And secondly, the user's Horizon virtual machine, which runs the Horizon agent, either on-premise or in the cloud, and that runs the Cisco Webex app or Cisco Webex Meetings app, or a combination of both. And thirdly, at the bottom, the Webex services, which are cloud-based. So we can then identify the traffic routing by the key and symbol on the right. So as you can see, our audio and video traffic traverses directly from the endpoint to the Cisco Web Cloud service. So again, a benefit here is that it's going direct to the source. It isn't having to traverse to the VMware environment through the Horizon virtual machine. It is going direct to source. And then the data and control channel, which is used to initiate that, again, as we saw in Teams, is again encapsulated either within Blast Extreme or PC over IP between the endpoint and the virtual desktop. And that traffic is channeled into the Webex app or Webex Meetings app, and that has to be deployed specifically in the VDI mode, as you'll see during the demonstration. So again, results in exactly the same benefits as before. It improves the user experience, it reduces the latency, and importantly, removes that load from the data center, from the Horizon virtual machine, as we saw before it with Microsoft Teams. So we're going to go ahead and do a demonstration of some of these features. Let me just see, and then there is a poll after the demo. So going to go ahead and play the
Okay, so we'll now start the demonstration. What you're looking at here, just to start, is the 10ZiG Manager Server console, and specifically we're focused in on a few clients here that are local to me in my office where I'm working. So the two clients specifically that we're going to do the demonstration on is firstly the 10ZiG Windows 10 IoT based client, the 6010Q, which is also offered as a Linux-based client, and that is this running on this particular model here, the 5800Q series. So with the Windows 10 client, we'll demonstrate VMware Horizon client running Teams optimization as well as Cisco Webex Vdi. And then on the Linux or the NOS64V based client, we'll demonstrate VMware Horizon client running with the Webex Vdi plugin. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to demonstrate Teams optimization as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and VNC across to the Windows-based client. I'll drop in the password and also just enable the display scaling just so you can all see the view a little bit easier. Okay, so this particular client is running Shell Launcher, and what Shell Launcher is, it's a way of hiding the regular Explorer shell from your users. And this is a feature that we can turn on through our 10ZiG UWF wizard, as well as some other neat things. And I'll link to some videos that we've recently made available to demonstrate how you can turn those features on. And just to demonstrate, if I go ahead and cancel out of the Horizon client, you can see that the net result is the Horizon client is reopened. And as you can see, again, there's no other Explorer shell here. So it almost is just very much like a regular kiosk mode to Horizon, but with Windows 10 IoT running under the hood. Now, in order to do the demonstration, I do want to switch out of that. So to switch out of it, I'm just going to go ahead and sign out of that user. So the shell launcher is assigned to a default account that runs on the 10ZiG Windows 10 client, as you can see, called Thin Client User. And instead, I'll sign in as the admin account. Now, that Thin Client User account does automatically log in. So in terms of getting back out of it, you have to go through that same sequence or some alternatives in order to sign back in as the admin, as I'm doing here. Now, once in as admin, I can go ahead and I can run the Horizon client, and we can proceed with the demo. So I'll go ahead and enter my credentials, and I'm going to connect to my own personal VM with the fact it is persistent and allows me to do whatever I want. Okay, so we signed into the desktop. The first thing we're going to demonstrate is those cool new features that just talked about before, such as large gallery view and also the together mode. But it's worth just recapping on the setup steps for enabling Teams optimization in VMware Horizon. So as well as meeting the prerequisites, i.e. the Horizon Agent and Horizon Client 2006 or version 8 as a minimum, you also have to turn on a couple of settings in the Horizon Agent, and these are done through Gpos. So if we go into Group Policy Editor here, we've also installed the Horizon Agent Gpos, and you'll find those under Administrative Templates and VMware View Agent Configuration, and then specifically under VMware HTML5 features. So under here we have firstly the VMware HTML5 features, which as you can see has to be enabled, and then also under VMware WebRTC redirection features, that's where you'll find the media optimization for Microsoft Teams. Then on the client device, you have to also enable the Teams optimization feature, which from a typical install is included by default. So these are the two main steps that you have to do. Now, for anybody that's configured GPOs before, you'll know they reside in the registry, specifically under HKey Local Machine Software, Policies, VMware Inc., and then the first parameter or setting that we went to is under VMware HTML5 Server, this one here, which as you can see is enabled 1, and then VMware WebRTC redirection, where Teams enabled is 1 as well. Okay, let's go ahead. I can't remember if Teams is open by default. No, it isn't. So let's go ahead and open Microsoft Teams on this VDI-based desktop. Now, for anybody that has configured and played with Teams optimization before, the first thing that you will want to do is to validate that Teams optimization is running successfully. So the location of it has changed in recent versions of the Teams desktop app. You'll now find it under here, the settings, the 3 dots. So if we go to settings and then go to about version, we'll see the banner here, which makes up a couple of significant points. First off, the version of the Teams desktop application. So again, one of the prerequisites is to run a minimum version of the Teams desktop app. and again, that is referenced in the webinars and the content, which I'll reference through the demonstration as well in a moment. But also importantly, you can see the fact that VMware is operating in the media optimized mode, or Teams rather is operating with VMware media optimized. Now, also, if we then go ahead and go to settings under here, and we go towards our devices, what we can actually see here are devices that are locally connected to the endpoint, and they are basically enumerated through the media engine that's now integrated as part of the Horizon client. So you can see we have a Plantronics Blackwire 510 headset, as well as, well, it states a USB video device, but it is, I think, a Logitech C920 webcam. And that's me in the background, so shadowing the client that's just behind me, and again, you can see the fact that they're now locally connected. Now, if we go ahead and just go to start a meeting, then we can just demonstrate where those new features reside, as well as demonstrate a couple of other bits. So if I go ahead here and click Meet Now, start meeting. Again, we're not doing a live meeting as such where we actually have anybody or any other peer on the other side. But if we do come again to the three dots here, we can see that we do now have the large gallery in preview mode, as well as the together mode in preview. Now, these features are delivered just by updating the Teams desktop app to that version that I just demonstrated or referred to a few seconds ago. So in order to leverage these new features, you are just required to update the Teams desktop app in the virtual desktop. So there's no updates required for either the Horizon agent or the Horizon client. Now, if we go into large gallery, again the preview mode, again, because there's only one participant here, we're not going to see much, other than the fact you might be able to recognize now that the webcam encoding rate has reduced slightly in order to be able to display up to, I believe, 49 participants on this display at any one time. And let me just move over to the desktop here. And if we go ahead and go into the together mode, we can now see I'm in the kind of auditorium style room. So these are really, really great features. All three of them, even the default gallery view that, as I mentioned in the slides, where the initial versions of Teams optimization were limited to just viewing the one prominent participant, you're now able to view 2 by 2 or 4 as a whole in the regular gallery view, as well as up to 49, I believe, in the large gallery and the together modes. So again, as I always do when I demonstrate next these features, let's just see the effect of moving the load from the virtual desktop towards the client device. Now, if we look at Task Manager, and again, at the moment, this is Task Manager on the virtual machine, the Horizon agent. If we go to Users here, and we look at Microsoft Teams, you can see the process usage is very, very low. It's just the low-level kind of signaling, authentication, and handoff to the virtual channels in order to synchronize things like the video and the audio with the media engine that runs on the Horizon client. So again, you can see it's very, very low. It's around about 12-13% at the moment, and really none of that is made up of Teams. Now, if we go and minimize the Horizon agent or client connection, sorry, and if we display the Task Manager, and this is now displaying the Task Manager on the actual client device, the endpoint, and if we go here to Users, we can then see the fact that we're running around about 40% here on the CPU with that video call that's running on the virtual desktop. And as you can see, that's made up, well, actually partly for Task Manager, but also significantly the Horizon View client. So very, very low overhead, but again, that would expect to increase as other participants join the call. So you would typically get to see on this specific hardware around about 40 to 50%, I think, from memory. But that again just demonstrates the shift in load from the virtual desktop to the client, and again, one of the sort of major benefits of running Teams in its optimized form. Let's go back and switch to the virtual desktop, and then let's just quit out of this meeting. Okay, so the next thing I want to demonstrate is Cisco Webex. Now, just to demonstrate a couple of things, or to cover a couple of things that are required here, on the Horizon Agent, Webex specifically isn't tied as such to the Horizon Agent. The features or the equivalent features that you have in Cisco Webex are delivered through the individual Webex MSI, as we'll see in a moment. Again, there aren't specific features that are bundled into the Horizon Agent, as we saw just before with Microsoft Teams. And the same goes for the endpoint device, that there is a separate plugin that you either have to install alongside the Horizon client in Windows as well as Linux. And again, we'll cover the Linux side of this afterwards, as well as demonstrating the Windows side of thing here. Now, one thing I do just want to cover, and again, it's covered in the guide that I'll link to at the end of the demo, is if we go into README here, you'll see there is a particular set of switches that you have to include when you're installing Cisco Webex MSI. Now, I've made a note here as well. There are two versions and two flavors of Cisco Webex. There's Webex or Webex app, which was formerly Webex Teams, and there's Webex or Cisco Webex Meetings, and the MSI is named accordingly. So if you do have a situation where you're running both, just remember the naming of them. Webex is Webex app, Webex is Webex Meetings. Now, they might change over time as the products, I think the branding might change, etc., but it's just a note that I made. Now, significantly, when you're installing the Webex applications in the virtual desktop, do make sure that you are installing them with these switches, and specifically the enable VDI equals 1. If you just go ahead and install the MSI on the virtual desktop, it'll miss the VDI components, and the step that I'll show you in a moment to confirm whether or not the virtual channel is running will be missed. So that is a mandatory step, and very important that you get that right. So as we can see, Webex is installed here. If we also just switch for a second back to the client device as well, we can see, as well as the VMware Horizon client being installed, the Webex VDI plugin is installed as well. And in terms of installation steps, it is necessary to install the Horizon client first and the Webex VDI plugin afterwards. Now, at this point in time, the Horizon client is pre-installed onto all of the 10ZiG images, and in future, the Webex VDI will be installed by default as well. But just take a note of that, dependent on the version of your Windows 10 IoT image, and if necessary, install that Webex VDI plugin separately onto the client device. Let's then go ahead and open Cisco Webex. Now, like we had before, there is a particular step that you can take within the Webex app to confirm that it is running in the optimized mode, or as they refer to it, VDI mode. So to do that, you can click the user account that you're signed in as, and if you go to Help and then the Health Checker, under the Health Checker specifically, you can see the VDI portion of the Webex, and as you can see, all the services are accessible. and it gives you also some status here in terms of the client versions that are running both on the virtual desktop. So this is under the Webex client that again was installed through the MSI, and then the VDI plugin, which is on the client device that you just saw before. And then also finally we can get to see the round trip time, which is the virtual channel link between again the client device and the virtual desktop. Now, very similar to Microsoft Teams, when Cisco Webex is running in its VDI form, or if you prefer to call it optimized mode, if you go to settings, you'll see a very similar thing that if we go to audio, we get to see the same set of audio devices that are physically plugged into the endpoint, as well as under video, again, the same USB video device. So that's the same Plantronics webcam that we saw when running in Teams optimized form. And the two platforms can run side by side as you would in a regular sort of PC or desktop environment. So you can have both the Cisco Webex VDI form as well as Teams optimization. The only thing that you can't do, which is the same limitation as a regular desktop, is run the webcam simultaneously with both applications. If we just go ahead and go into, let's go into here, just so that we can simulate the same thing that we did under Teams, where we go ahead and we open a meeting. In fact, I'll leave it there because the preview here is a larger view, so it will generate more traffic and load both on the endpoint device and switch it away from the virtual desktop. So if we go into Task Manager and we go to, again, Users, we should now be able to see a couple of things. So first off, the Cisco Hvd Agent. So that is in effect the virtual channel. So any sort of traffic that goes between the virtual machine and the plugin that resides on the endpoint, and then also the Webex app itself. So again, very similar sort of thing to what we saw with Teams, that even though we have a video call in progress, the process usage is very, very low. And if we then switch over to the endpoint device and again go into Task Manager under Users, we can see again similar sort of thing. The average is around sort of 19 or 24% at the moment, and that is made up, where is it? So that's made up specifically of the Webex VDI plugin. So the Horizon client, this is the difference between Cisco Webex and Microsoft Teams. The Horizon client this time is very much idle. It's actually the Webex VDI plugin that's generating the CPU load, again because of the fact that Webex is separated away from the Horizon client versus Teams, where it's integrated as part of the Horizon agent and the Horizon client. So hopefully that demonstration shows again the shift in load and traffic both for Microsoft Teams and Cisco Webex. Now what I just want to do, let's just kill that call, and then we can go ahead and go to the Linux-based client just to show the equivalent thing for Webex from there. Okay, so the final part of the demo is if we go ahead and we just shadow the Linux-based client here, and if we go ahead and sign in to the same desktop as we saw before. But before I do, sorry, let me just demonstrate the setup of this. So if we go into Control Panel and we put in the password, if we go into VMware Horizon, significantly there is the Cisco Webex option here. So that is off by default. Where you're running Cisco Webex with the 10ZiG Linux-based clients, you just need to enable this particular option here, the Enable Cisco Webex VDI. There is a EULA agreement down here as well, and in future versions there will be the option here of specifying different plugin versions dependent on what version of Webex you're running in the virtual desktop, because of any backwards compatibility issues that might occur through Cisco Webex. So that will come in future versions. So if we click OK to that, and again let's go ahead and sign in. connect to the same desktop as before. Let's turn the display scaling back on as well. Then let's go ahead back to the Webex app. And if we go back to the same health checker as before, you'll notice the VDI is connected, but it does warn us about the fact there is a version mismatch. So as I just briefly mentioned before, there will be a situation that in future versions of firmware, we will be bundling multiple versions of the VDI plugin to allow you to match with what runs in the virtual desktop. But again, the VDI is still in operation. It is just giving us a warning that there is a version mismatch. And to prove that, if we go ahead and we go to settings of the Webex client, we should be able to see under audio devices the same Plantronics headset, with the fact I've just switched the USB device into the Linux-based client, as well as the same webcam. This time it's appearing or labeled as a UVC camera, just because that's the way that the Linux client synchronizes with it within the kernel. And again, as we saw before, it is rendering that webcam this time, but via the Linux-based client. So that concludes the demonstration. I think, just as I briefly mentioned, I just want to refer to a couple of useful points of documentation, etc. And again, I have linked to those in the WebEx. So there are a couple of 10ZiG relevant documents. First off, the VMware Horizon Teams Optimization Guide that covers all the relevant setup steps, a lot of which I covered through the demo, as well as then an equivalent guide for Cisco Webex if you are using that. So again, you've got links to those two documents within the content, and then also on the 10ZiG YouTube side of things, if you search for 10ZiG technology, you'll see a series of webinars and content that we've generated specifically over the past year, where all of these unified comms apps have really taken off. So as I referred to earlier, there is some video guides here in terms of creating a dedicated shell for VMware Horizon, as we can see. And there's also a just short of 20-minute video here on using the UWF to create a secure environment on the Windows 10 IoT client. So very useful series of videos there. And then finally, again, I linked to this at the end of the slides, the Teams optimization guide from VMware, which is very, very useful. I recommend you put it into your bookmarks and refer back to it as necessary. So that concludes the demonstration, and then we'll switch back to the slides.
All right, so hopefully everybody enjoyed that demonstration. There was lots of questions coming in, which I've answered privately, but I'm going to go through some of them just for the audience where they might be relevant for everybody. Now, before I do that, let me, again, I've just popped up the next poll, which is asking if you'd like to receive a 10ZiG demo device, and there was actually a couple of those very questions during the demo. So again, if you are interested, select yes there or even later. And whilst everybody is submitting there, what I'll do is I'll just again recap on some of the questions that came in during the demo. So this came up a couple of times where users are or have a requirement for multiple UC apps. So let's say that your users need to support Zoom and Microsoft Teams or Cisco Webex in the same environment. You can do that. The only real exception is the fact that, again, each one has to meet the minimum requirements. So right now, again, if Teams is in the mix, you have to do that from a Windows-based client to leverage the optimized features. But all of the plugins can run side by side. The only, again, exception is making sure that each one meets the minimum requirements, and of course, that you can't run a video call simultaneously, which is exactly the same concept as you would have on a regular desktop or laptop type environment. Questions about recording of the webinar, which yes, of course, that will come out for sure. Bo mentioned about surf posters in my office. That's a great shout. Would really like to brighten that up, especially now I'm getting back to the office from home. Thank you. There was a question about the demo VDI. Was it running NVIDIA Grid vGPU? It absolutely wasn't. It was just software emulated GPU, and that's one of the beauties of the optimization, that you can reduce the VM down to more or less 2 vCPUs, and the endpoint takes the load. So all of those video calls are offloaded to the endpoint and not run in the virtual machine, either on vGPU or software emulated GPU. What else do we have? The latest NOS firmware does or does not include the Webex Vdi client, question mark. So it is supported, but on the very latest. So again, available on the website today, as was linked in the slides. The 16.1.26 version supports Cisco Webex. Zoom VDI is also supported natively in the firmware. I didn't get a chance to go as far back as when it was first introduced, but if you go back to, for example, 16.1.24, which was earlier this year, Zoom VDI is natively included. And it is recommended to upgrade, with the fact that a lot of these VDI plugins, again, just because of the pandemic and the remote working from all of the vendors like Cisco, Zoom, and Microsoft, they're all very new to the market, so they are evolving all the time. And with every release, we try to get to a point where we can integrate at that time the latest and greatest in terms of versions. Remind me the minimum version of Teams and Horizon Client version. So for Horizon Client and Agent, it's either 7.13 or Horizon 8 or /2006 as they now refer to it. Is the Webex plugin available for the thin client running Linux? Yes, as mentioned, that's the 16.1.26 version, as was covered through the demo. There was another question about the gallery view not appearing in the gallery view as a demonstrated. That came up earlier as well. I would suggest talking to either your Microsoft or your VMware rep on those. In the early stages when that release was introduced, I think around the February-March timeframe, it was done in a staged rollout, either by region or sector. So it's effectively a flag, I believe, that has to be turned on. So if you aren't seeing it in your specific environment or region, again, if you speak to VMware or Microsoft, it's probably a switch that has to be turned on, and it's a kind of staged rollout. So yeah, Teams optimization on Linux. Again, I covered that earlier. We are close with VMware on that. We are waiting for the VMware Horizon client for Linux to support Teams optimization. It is coming soon, but again, under NDA, I can't give any more information, unfortunately. But rest assured, once VMware release it, 10ZiG will be hot to the trail there.
And I just wanted to butt in real quick and say thank you to everyone sending in all these questions, and thank you to everyone that is responding to this poll.
Yeah, thank you very much. Much appreciated. And then there's the final question, I think, before I just recap very quickly on the slides because we're running out of time. There was a question about the Windows-based client and the justification of using a 10ZiG Windows-based client versus a Windows PC, and why would 10ZiG be a better path? It's a great question, and one of the main benefits of the 10ZiG Windows-based thin client is, again, some of the inbuilt features that are incorporated both through Windows 10 IoT and the 10ZiG management tool, which of course is all-inclusive and FOC. And as you saw in the demo, you get features like the shell launcher and the UWF filter and the free remote management that you have to do with third-party products if you don't do that. Unfortunately, I think we are running short of time now. I've hopefully answered majority of questions there. Just do want to explain the last two slides. I'm not going to go into detail, but I've summarized what I've covered throughout the webinar, as well as the demonstration, commonly asked questions, as well as very useful links, again, that I talked about through the webinar that are definitely a go-to. In this slide, if you're doing Teams optimization, and then in the next slide, the same for Cisco Webex. So yeah, they are hopefully a good go-to for you after the webinar as a resource center. And that takes us right bang on the hour to the end of the webinar. And a thank you again for everybody's participation and interaction. There's been a ton of really great questions. Really appreciate everybody's participation in the polls. And yeah, I think that's it. I'll hand back to you, Drew.
All right, great. And yeah, I have to reiterate, thank you to our audience for sending in the questions. Thank you for participating in the polls. But I really want to give a big shout out to Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. This has been a great presentation. You put a lot of effort into it, and yeah, it's just been great. An hour. Look at that. How quickly an hour flies, right? So
absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome, and I've really enjoyed it. And thank you to you as well, Drew. It's been great working with you, and this platform is awesome. I've really enjoyed using it for the first time, and look forward to using it again with you on the next session.
Yes, hey everyone, don't forget, if you happen to be either living in Europe or you're an early riser in the US, in 2 weeks on June 29th, we have another 10ZiG webcast. So make sure you check out that. But I just wanted to thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to speak with us today. As a reminder to our audience, you will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand link from today's webcast. So yes, this will be this recording will be sent to you. To find out more about the VMUG webcast program, visit vmug.com and check out the education page. And we're getting a lot of thank yous in the question and answer too. So yeah, take it all in, Kevin.
Will do.
Please make sure to complete the short online evaluation that will pop up as this webcast ends, and let us know how today's session went. And lastly, from all of us here at VMUG, thank you and have a great rest of your day.